On today's show, the check engine light is on for the Capitals. Follow me to the garage as I pop the hood on this year's Capitals team. Is it just a loose gas cap, or is this team facing a complete rebuild? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. I would love to talk Capitals hockey with you one-on-one, and we can do that on subtext. Just check the show description for more details. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about how the Capitals have struggled as of late. We do know that they have dropped 6 games in a row, and the check engine light is on for this year's team. You know, sometimes when you're driving and that check engine light comes on and you're like, I'm just going to ignore it. I'm sure it's nothing. And then sometimes if it's something major, it actually starts flashing and you're thinking to yourself, uh-oh, I think the Capitals check engine light is starting to flash. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We will talk about Rasmus Sandin, one of the pillars of the blue line, will be out for at least the next 2 games. What does that mean for a recent call-up from Hershey? And then in the final segment, we will talk about your comments about how you think the Capitals are playing. But just to get it going here, there's a lot at stake at this next game. And I talk about it all the time that, you know, these are must-win games, but the Capitals are definitely now on the outside looking in as far as their playoff hopes. There is little to no margin for error if they want to make it to the playoffs. Some would say that it's already too late, but in any event, I think the Capitals need to address it, if not just for this season, for next season, so they can hit the ground running in the fall. That's ultimately, at the end of the day, what it's about is winning games. So what's behind the Capitals' 6-game losing streak? Carberry's trying to do the near impossible by taking a relatively inexperienced group to the playoffs. And what am I talking about here is, you know, I think that we went into this season kind of half-cocked. We didn't have a real good idea about who was going to be on the active roster. And then something crazy happened. Well, Nick Backstrom stepped away from hockey, and all of a sudden, Connor McMichael, who's still fairly inexperienced, took on a bigger role. Then Hendrix LaPierre got called up, taking on a bigger role. 2 guys that are inexperienced. We've seen the additions of Ivan Miroshnichenko. We've seen Beck Malenstein. That this team that has been kind of this grizzled old veteran core for so many years got a youth infusion, not by design, but based on necessity, and that is putting the Capitals in an interesting position. These young and inexperienced players are having to try to stand up to some of the best in the NHL, and you're starting to see some of that inexperience or the wetness behind the ears come into focus. When the younger guys are getting outworked, Spencer relies on the team's veterans, and they are starting to show signs of fatigue. I saw that with Alex Ovechkin, you know, wiping his head off, and even Tom Wilson looking like he was fatigued, like he was out of breath. That I know that we want to integrate the youth, but you're starting to see that inexperience. So what does that mean? Well, I'm going to put the veterans out there to try to right what is wrong out on the ice. Subsequently, you're seeing Tom Wilson logging heavy minutes, Alex Ovechkin, John Carlson, and that's what's coming into focus. And again, this is something that should have been taken care of before the season already started. This is loading up a car on a family trip across the country on a car that has 200,000 miles and just crossing your fingers that it's going to make it all the way across. And guess what? You make it to middle America, and guess what? The engine stalls, and you pull into the garage, and they add this part, and they add that part, and you're trying to limp it across the finish line. It's something that should have been taken care of before the season started. Brian McClellan should have said, hey, I'm driving around a car with 200,000 miles on it. Should I just roll the dice and hope that it makes it, or should I address it? Well, he just rolled the dice and hoped that everything was going to be okay. Evgeny Kuznetsov stepped away. Anthony Mantha was dealt. Joel Edmondson, that this team looks markedly different than it did to start the season. Many things that should have been taken care of. And how do they fix it? That is the difficult part that they're in right now. The Caps are in a tough spot. They seem to be playoff bound not too long ago. And they are definitely now on the outside looking in, earning a total of 2 points out of a possible 12 in the last 6 games. What happened? Ultimately, I don't know. I think that it's kind of what I talked about off the top there. It's the inexperienced youth. I think that it's the veterans getting overworked. That's my assessment on it anyway. The Caps fail to seize the moment and get caught up in their own heads trying to come up with a great pass. Instead of taking the shot they should take on net, looking for the cutesy pass like a hot potato. I don't want it. You take it. Then the net's open. Go ahead and take it. That's your job. It's just sustaining that and being consistent is a real struggle for us right now. To do it for 60 minutes, Carberry says, and even for like 2-3 minutes when we lose momentum, what experienced teams do is nip it in the bud right away. And that's what's not happening, is they're not nipping it in the bud right away. Spencer Carberry's doing what he can do with this, inexperienced team, sprinkled in with veterans as well, trying to make a cohesive team and push it across the finish line, hopefully in victory lane. But taking a look at it, the check engine light for this team is on. So what should you do? If this was your car, you'd go ahead and plug in the box there and check the codes. And what's wrong? Well, what is wrong is, for one, they're too reliant on young and unproven talent, trusting them to stand up to some of the best in the NHL. The second code that's popping up, the veterans on the team are getting outworked trying to pick up the slack. And the third code that's coming up here is thinking too much instead of shooting. Just shooting it, crash the net, hoping for first and second opportunities that good things will happen. Something that has served them well, but has seemed to be forgotten here as of late. So what are the remedies to this situation? This car, if you will. They can clear the codes and just hope the problem will go away. Have you ever had a car like that and the check engine light comes on and they're like, well, I'll try clearing the codes and maybe the problem fixed itself? I think to a certain extent, that's what Brian McClellan did. It's the hear no evil, see no evil. There's no problem on the ice. There is a problem on the ice. So what did he do? He took out his diagnostic box and he reset the codes and go, hey, I reset the codes. The light's not anymore. All is good. Enjoy your vacation, guys. Get back to what made them successful is one of the ways they should fix it. Shoot as much as possible and crash the net and hope for a juicy rebound on a second and third opportunity. What's another remedy for the problem is rebuild the engine in the summer and get ready for 24-25. That's what they have to do. I ultimately think that it is a long shot for the Capitals to make it to the playoffs. And let's be real here. Let's get real here. If the Capitals do make it to the playoffs, what are your thoughts about how far they're going to make it? Are they going to get fanned out in a hurry in the first round? Is that really a victory? I think that they should have their eyes on the 2024-25 season, a rebuild of some sort. It's just the inevitable. It's taking that car out on the road. It's sputtering. It's breaking down all the time. You need to do it. It's expensive. It's going to be awkward for a while, but you need to do it for sustainability. You want to get that car all the way back to the other side of the country where you started. We want to get the Capitals back to consistent winning in the postseason. This will be season number 2 in a row if they do, in fact, miss the playoffs. Unacceptable, in my opinion. So that is what the Capitals are looking at right now, is that rebuild. It's a tough thing, but despite the poor play as of late, the Capitals are still not out of it and are contending for either the second wild card spot in the East or the third spot in the Metro Division. So they're not out of it yet. But, one of the things that I've talked about is there is no leeway for going through losing a couple games. I would say if they lose, one game here, that could be curtains for this team. It already might be. As I record this at 9:37 local, there are games being played. Things could change by the time you listen to this podcast, that the Capitals squandered opportunities in some games in particular that they should won. They lost to the Hurricanes. They beat them before. They know how to do it. So that's the frustrating part for me, is I think that intrinsically they know how to win hockey games. It's just sometimes they forget how to do it. All right, so coming up here straight ahead, we will talk about how Rasmus Sandin was injured in the last game. And we know for sure that he will miss at least 2 games, but it was said that he might miss the entire rest of the season. What does that mean for the Capitals and the Blue Line? I'll discuss straight ahead. It's playoff time in the NBA, NHL, baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on the app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. And let's face it, guys, if you are watching a game, say you're watching the Nationals, say you're watching the Capitals, and say you're not that into it, open up that FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. It makes watching the game that much more exciting. So visit FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Capitals need all hands on deck if they have any hopes of making it to the playoffs. And what happened in the last game towards the end of the first period, at the end of the first period, Rasmus Sandin gets hit and does not return. And then Spencer Carberry hits us with the news that he is going to miss at least the next 2 games, potentially the rest of the season. It is going to be next man up. And who is the next man up or men up? Well, we do know that we have Vincent Iorio on the active roster, but also Lucas Johansen. Yes, that Lucas Johansen, the 2016 first-round pick, will get another crack on the big team. With Sandin out for at least the next 2 games, Iorio will draw in, and Trevor Van Riemsdyk will slide to the left. It also means bigger roles for Vincent Iorio, Trevor Van Riemsdyk, and Alex Alexiev. More minutes, like John Carlson. They should be ready to do it at this point. More opportunities for some young guys to step in and step up at a big moment for our team, Carberry said. If you want an everyday role on this team, if you want a chance at cracking the roster in the fall, make the most of your opportunities. Take a look at Scarbosa. He got a call up just based on Kuznetsov, and he has hung around. So it is possible if you really stand out. Rasmus Sandin, an upper body injury, won't travel with the Capitals for the trip to Detroit and Buffalo after being injured the night before. A difficult position for the Capitals. Rasmus Sandin is a dynamic blue liner that can move the puck really well, has an offensive flair, but a good defenseman in his own right, a guy that plays sometimes bigger than he is. He's not one of the bigger guys on the ice, but don't tell him that. Asked if it's possible Sandin won't be back before the end of the regular season, Carberry said possible, but we'll see. Definitely not on this road trip. So Lucas Johansen is familiar with his team. He's had several cups of coffee on the big team here. He is familiar with Spencer Carberry's system, so I think that it is a good fit. So this is another opportunity for the next man up. The next man up in this case is Lucas Johansen. He is no stranger to playing on the big team, as an excellent opportunity for him to impress the Caps once again, as this team is fighting for their playoff lives. He made the opening night roster and then was waived and reassigned to Hershey. He is that first-round pick from 2016 that was supposed to be the next wave of Capitals players, blue liners, to make a name for himself. Who really stood out this season? Alex Alexiev. He was the guy that got bumped when Joel Edmondson joined the team, and then subsequently when he went to Toronto. Guess what? It's Alex Alexiev's opportunity again, and all things considered, he made the most of his opportunities. It is possible for Lucas Johansen to finally solidify his spot on this team. I understand that if Rasmus Sandin comes back, that it's not going to be an easy fit, but changes are afoot on this team. I expect the Capitals to be active this summer, so there is the potential that if one of these players, either Vincent or Lucas, really pops off the page, they could get a crack next season in the fall. Lucas is one of the players we've heard about for quite some time that will one day be one of the next bigs on the blue line. In 22 AHL games with the Bears, he scored 2 goals and 10 assists. Injuries have derailed his growth, and this season has been injury-free, knock on wood. That is what is serving him well. He's had the opportunity to do more on the Capitals, but he is another player that is prone to being bit by the injury bug. Johansen has more experience and is more familiar with Carberry's systems over Vincent Iorio. He also gives the Capitals another left-handed option. So a good thing for depth. We don't know who's going to be in. I would expect, of course, that it's going to either be Vincent or it's going to be Lucas. In any event, make the most of it, boys. Prove to everyone why you belong here. We've seen guys step up this year. I've talked about in the previous segment that there's a lot of inexperience, but being fair, Connor McMichael really took steps forward this year. Hendrix LaPierre, big steps forward. Malenstein, a stud out there, of course. And then you take a look at Ivan Miroshnichenko that is taking steps in the right direction. He has been exposed. I still think that ultimately he is getting acclimated to the North American game, but I think that he will be a dynamic forward for the Capitals for years to come. It's just patience, and I think good things will come. Think of the Nationals, think of James Wood, think of Dylan Cruz, Robert Hassel, Brady House. Same thing goes for the Capitals, that they have these guys simmering in the crock pot that is the Hershey Bears, and I think that good things will come for the Capitals soon. About this season, that's not helping the position that they're in this season. Ultimately, what we need is this team to do what they did a couple of weeks ago, where they were crashing the net and just waiting for those rebounds. And instead of looking for the cutesy pass, shoot, and hope that Lucas Johansen and or Vincent Iorio are a good Band-Aid in Rasmus Sandin's absence. All right. So coming up here straight ahead, we will talk about your comments. I know you know my thoughts on the Capitals. What are your thoughts on the Capitals' play as of late? I'll discuss next. Regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our #1 choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. And let me tell you something, guys, I was not the kind of guy that was that into fantasy sports until I found Sleeper. And let me tell you something, I love it. To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 players' stats. You heard me, Capitals fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So from time to time, I like to go to your comments on how you think the Capitals are playing. And the first comment here comes from a Kristen H82, someone that watches the show on a regular basis. I do appreciate it. I waited this time and just have to say 1000% agree about the fans and negativity. I commented on the small fact last video because, as we know, I must express myself right away. As far as the rest of the schedule, it's so darn hard to tell with this team. It is literally any given game we have this magic, but this year, rest of the schedule, yikes, I get sad. I said that to never dwell. I automatically look forward to seeing them again, regardless of the outcome of this year. That's the way you have to look at it. And like I talked about in yesterday's show, I am a passionate Capitals fan, of course. I do a podcast on this team, but I'm not going to let it ruin my day. I'm not going to let it ruin my life if they don't make it to the playoffs. Of course, I have hopes. I have dreams of this team winning another Stanley Cup, but I'm also excited about the future. I sometimes daydream about what Ryan Leonard will mean for this team. It's an exciting thing for me to think about what he will mean for this team. And not only that, I want to see the steps and growth about what this team will look like in years to come, post Alex Ovechkin, post TJ Oshie, John Carlson, those kind of players. What is the next wave of Capitals players going to look like? What is the next nucleus of this team going to look like? Another comment here is from MedicMan05. Look at the shots on goal, and the downfall speaks volumes. You don't normally beat NHL teams averaging 20 shots on goal per game. A lot of those shots were easy saves for the opposition's goalie. Touche. I agree 100%. You gotta. The thing of it is that when the Capitals were engaged, it's a lot of tape-to-tape passes. It is just being in the right position and good things will happen. And it's not a foreign concept. This team has done it this season. For whatever reason, it has been something that has eluded them. So a difficult position for the Capitals to be in. Kid T3068 says, guys need to stop with the cute passes and start peppering the goalie with every opportunity. Defenders will have to change their approach to us as well. The game changer. Alex Ovechkin has been successful for years setting up from his office on the power play, but it is something that he still has some luck with, but I think is more defendable, especially with this young group of NHL players that are showing what they have. It is something that, you know, it is, they're finding countermeasures to help defeat it. Another comment here is recently it's not been good, but this still is an interesting year for the Capitals at this point. They are more in flux than they were a year ago. More kids getting more NHL playing time is a positive. They already have more points this year than they did last year. This team's work is in progress with the playoffs looking more dim. It will be interesting to see who comes to play and who doesn't. That will tell you something. It will. And the leaders on this team, Alex Ovechkin in particular, are one of the guys that has risen to the challenge. He is the guy that has grabbed the team by the horns and did what he could possibly do to try to take this team to the next level. It hasn't been an easy thing for him, to be sure, but it's a tough thing to be the only guy that's doing it. I think that, you know, I've talked about in the show, and if you're an everydayer, you know that, I think that when the Capitals struggle, they go into fight or flight mode, and they have to stick to the script that was laid out for them, and I think that good things will happen. But that's the tough thing. You know, there are only a few games. I want to say the last game is next week on Tuesday. That's what it's coming down to. We are coming up to the end of the ride of the regular season for the 23-24 season. Either they're in or they're out. The last comment talked about more points than last season, and okay, that's great. But it's another season that potentially they will miss the playoffs. And that is something that, you know, weighs heavy on me. Again, it's not going to ruin my day or my life. It's just unfortunate. And when I say it's unfortunate, I guess the biggest thing that I'm trying to say is I think that a lot of people that watch this show and listen to it, obviously you are passionate Capitals fans. I think that a lot of us saw this coming, didn't we? I mean, the insiders, they saw it coming. The beat writers for the Capitals, they saw it coming. Why didn't Brian McClellan see it coming? That is the question. You know, the big fallback that I've heard for the last so many years here is that they don't want to do a complete rebuild while Alex Ovechkin is still here. Have the Capitals been competitive the last 2 seasons? And I guess that competitive is open to interpretation. I guess, you know, they're not cellar dwellers, but they're not making it to the playoffs, or they're on the cusp of not making it again. Again, a lot will be determined. I'm not saying they're out of it. They could go on a heater here towards the end to take down the Red Wings and take down all these top-tier teams. Not impossible, no. Improbable, yes. That is the position that the Capitals are in. They've got to not go into next season with this same lackluster showing. And it's often been said that Ted Leonsis, he does not tolerate failure. Well, maybe you haven't seen the Wizards. Also, take a look at the Capitals. That I think that, you know, things are going to have to change. I know that Brian McClellan, you know, re-upped here not long ago and got a promotion. But with that being said, is he the right guy? Think about, I'm forgetting the guy's name from the Vegas Golden Knights and the crazy moves that he did. I would love just a fraction of that. That, you know, we're seeing that we're struggling here. We're going to make some changes right now. And if we don't make changes right now, then what's the point? We need an earth shake. Or is this Ted Leonsis? Is this Dick Patrick? Is this the ownership trust? Are they just tightening the purse strings? Putting all their money in renovating Capital One Arena? I ultimately don't know. But as a Capitals fan, it's frustrating because I don't see a clear blueprint even for next season for a path to success. I really hope I'm wrong. I really hope that he shakes up the snow globe in the offseason. But that is all we can hope for. And for the rest of this season, all we can hope for is that these guys can remember what they did just a couple of weeks ago when this team was untouchable. Let's hope they can relive some of that former glory. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 streaming channel available on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.